If you had to select this Earth, paste it in something else, how would you go about that? I mean, we looked at a bunch of different selection tools. What might you use? I mean, we looked at things like, magic wands, quick selections, marquee tools. Magic wand? Let's give this a try. If I click on this hurricane up here, I get a hurricane selected. If I click on the water, I get the water selected. If I clicked on the space instead, that could be a way to go about it. Now, there is a little bit of an issue with that. Let's say I took the magic wand tool, and right now I've got a tolerance of 31. I think 32 is the default, but I clicked in here. So it's selecting whatever I clicked on, which in this case is black, and anything within 31 levels. So I clicked on 0. Remember 0 to 255, that grayscale range. I clicked on 0, and it's grabbing anything within 31 levels, which includes this. Doesn't include that because it's a nice contrasting edge. Looks like it did a pretty good job on the left side there. But if we pan around to the night side of the Earth, that selection starts to fall apart. There just isn't enough contrast between space and the night side of Earth for it to figure out where that edge is supposed to be. I mean, I could try dropping the tolerance like really low, and it's better, but it's still a little bit wobbly. And we'll probably find that we have a little bit of a fringe on the outside around here. Here's another way you could select something if it's a perfect square, a perfect circle. I mean, the Earth isn't a perfect circle, but it's pretty darn close. If we grab the elliptical marquee tool, if you hit M on the keyboard, it takes to where the rectangular hangs out. And if you click and hold, there's 4 little options in here. The elliptical. The Earth is an ellipse, isn't it? And if I did a click and a drag, I could probably get a selection that's, well, it's close. I kind of missed, though, didn't I? Maybe I'll try again. Maybe I'll start here. Oh, I kind of missed again, didn't I? Here's a little trick with the marquee tools. When you're trying to make a marquee selection, like ideally, you would click exactly at the same height as the top of the Earth and exactly on the same left side as the left side of the Earth, and everything would match up. But if you're off a little bit, you're like, oh no, I was a little bit too far to the left there. While you're using the marquee tool, if you hold down the space bar, you can start moving around that selection that you're making. So if you try to make a selection, it's not quite exact, hold down the space bar, keep the mouse button held down, also hold down the space bar, and you can move that marquee selection around. When you let go of spacebar, you're back to resizing it. So with the spacebar, you're moving the selection. With just the mouse button, you're resizing the selection. And when it looks good, let go, and there's your selection. And this works for the rectangular marquee, any of those tools. You can also resize the selection after it's made. If you've let go of everything and it's just a little too narrow or a little bit too short or a little bit too high, if you hover inside the marquee, you can move it around. Or if it's maybe a little bit too short, you can go under Select and transform the selection. The downside to the transform selection is you can actually end up with a slightly soft edge on your selection. Just like if you resize something that's made out of pixels, if you make it larger, it can come out a little bit blurry. Same thing with your selection. Once you've made it, if you transform it, it can get a little bit blurry. So that little space bar trick kind of helps. Start making your circle. If you miss, hold the space bar, and you can move it around. Let's actually copy this Earth. Let's go under Edit, Copy. And when you copy something, it goes onto your clipboard. Just like if you're in Word, you select some text, you copy it, it goes into the clipboard. Where's the clipboard? What is the clipboard? It's in your computer's RAM, and you have a limited amount of RAM. And for the most part, if you're selecting something from Safari or Chrome and copying it and then pasting it into a Word document, a little bit of text, barely anything. The thing about the clipboard with Photoshop is it can contain much more information than your regular computer's clipboard. Like let's say you have a 40 megapixel camera, you process something out at 16 bits per channel, you could have several hundred megabytes of information in there. And you could, in theory, select all, and you could copy all of those pixels. That would take up a lot of your RAM. Now this is a fairly small file, it's not going to make a big difference, but once we've got this copied and pasted over, I'll show you how to clear your clipboard in there. So select the Earth, Edit, Copy, or Command-C is the keyboard shortcut. Let's just throw this thing into a new document. Let's go under File, New, and you'll notice when you first go under New, it defaults to whatever size your clipboard is. Like the Earth that I selected seems to be 523 by 527 pixels. So if I just hit Create right now, it'll make a new document that will exactly hold the contents of the clipboard. Although we want this to be a little bit larger, so we're going to make it 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. And we'll leave the resolution at 72 pixels per inch there. So if yours doesn't say pixels, if it says inches, by golly, you're really going to want to put it to pixels, because if you make it 1,000 by 1,000 inches, it's going to be really big. So 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. And we'll just paste that Earth back in. Now let's say you were going to be doing a little promo piece, a little flyer that you could mail out to people. You're going to print it up and send it around, and you don't know how big you want this to be on that document. What happens if you scale something down? Does the quality stay the same? No, you're going to lose some pixels, aren't you? If you then scale it back up, it can look a little bit soft, can't it? Let me show you a little trick here. I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer. So I'll just grab it and make a copy of it. And one of them will be a regular old pixel layer. Actually, no, I won't call it that. I'll call it a stupid object. What the heck? But the other one, I'm going to call it a smart object. Do you know why? I'm going to convert it to a smart object. If I right-click on the name, convert to smart object. And let's talk about what a smart object is. Normally when we scale it down, we scaled something down, and if it's pixel-based, it throws away a whole lot of the pixel information. And then if you try to scale it back up, all you had was whatever was left after you scaled it down. With a smart object, it will remember all of that original pixel information. So when I convert this to a smart object, two things are going to happen. First, it now knows what this looks like right now. And second, this little icon has appeared here telling me that it's a smart object. So let's say I didn't know what size I wanted this to be. And I'm gonna scale both of these at the same time. To select both the layers, I'll just hold the Shift key and boink, I have both the Earths selected. And I'm going to choose Edit, Transform, Scale, or what's a really fast way to get to scale? Anybody know? If I go under Edit, I can go right to Free Transform, which is the same kind of thing as scale. Or the keyboard shortcut for Free Transform is Command T. So I do a Command T, and I shrink these things down, because I don't know how big I want them to be. I'll make them really small, just like a little MasterCard logo kind of thing. If I zoom in there, well, they both look about the same, don't they? They both lost a bunch of information. There's not nearly as many pixels left. What do you think would happen if I resized these back up? Let's give that a try. Well, looking about the same now, isn't it? Although, look at what happened. Now, guys, smart objects, depending on what you do with them, might take up a little bit more hard drive space. So there is a bit of a downside. You can end up with larger files, even if you're scaling things down. But I think the trade-off, the versatility, outweighs the downside. So let's say you were doing like a little flyer, a little promotional piece. That's one way that you could rotate things, scale them, play around with your layout, your composition, without doing any further damage to the file. Now there's something else I want to show you guys. We talked about the pen tool a while ago. What kind of information does the pen tool make? Vector information. The cool thing about vector information is, much like a smart object, you can scale it around. You can make it larger, smaller, all kinds of cool stuff. Now we use the pen tool. There are other ways to make vector information, and I'm going to show you one that you'll probably get mad at me for not showing you at the start, but I didn't show you because a lot of people just resort right to it. When you have an active selection, like let's say I was back on this Earth here and I have a selection, if I pop into my Paths panel there, at the bottom of it you'll see this little icon, looks like a marine mine or something. If you click on it, it'll actually convert whatever your selection was. Wow. I know, but just bear with me for a second. You'll notice it sucks to a moderate degree. And depending on the complexity of whatever you're trying to cut out, it can suck to a very large degree. And as any woodworker or construction worker or whatever will tell you, it's a lot faster to do a good job from the start than to try to fix a bad job. So if you took the quick selection tool and selected the person you're trying to cut out and then converted that selection into a path, it would be a nasty path. If you use that path to cut them out and put them into something else, it would be awful. You'd have to go in with the pen tool anyway. Notice it's just a regular old path. Actually, it's a work path right now. I should call it my Earth path. You'd have to go in with the pen tool anyway, and you have to select the little points in the areas where it sucked. Like you'll notice that this isn't quite the ellipse that it started out with on the selection there. So I'd have to select a point and play around with stuff anyway. And for how long it would take me to go in and fix this and turn it into a good path, it probably would have been a lot faster for me to just take my pen tool and do a proper job of it from the start. But that is a way of making a path. Now, once you have a path, there's a bunch of things that you can do with it. There's a little button here called Shape. And however you make the path, whether you really carefully cut out this bottle of shampoo, or maybe there's a company and they're like, yes, we want our logo to be an outline of this flower here. Just a solid fill, but just an outline of this daisy or whatever. So you very carefully make a path around the flower there. You can turn that path into a shape. Notice that we don't see the path layers here in the layers panel because, well, they're not layers. But if I have a path selected and I turn it into a shape, if I pop into my layers panel there, look what I have. It looks like the earth has disappeared, but if I look in the layers here, I have a shape layer. Notice this little icon here shows that it's a shape. You see the little nodes on the path there. And if I turn off the background, well, look at that. It's a big black disk. If I take my move tool, I can move it aside, and oh, it's just sitting in front of the earth there. Now this shape, let's just take a quick look at, let's grab the pen tool here. Let's take a look at the specs of this shape here. You think, okay, it's black pixels and there's nothing you can do about that. Ah, it's not pixels. It's a vector shape, and right now it's filled with black, and it has a 0.95 pixel white stroke around the outside of it. We can change that. I could make this any color I want. If I click on the fill here, I could make it a red fill. For the stroke, I could make it a blue outline and 30 pixels. That's really tacky, but you get the idea. Nice thing with this shape layer is it is still vector. If I grab my pen tool, I can play around with it. I can make it whatever shape. It's a Pac-Man. It's whatever you want it to be. There we go. It's a butt. Sorry. There we go. Anyway, you can play with the shape, you can change it, you can stop the fill, you can make it whatever color you need. It's pretty editable. Now, shape layers can be made in other ways as well. Let's say I just took my pen tool. Actually, let's get you guys playing around making a shape layer. Most of the stuff we're doing right now, we're not going to say this is just practice stuff, but let's make a new document and play with the pen tools making a shape layer. So go under File, New, and let's make a letter-sized document. Just under the Print tab there, it defaults to letter, and we'll hit Create. Hit the P key, and if you do a click, again, actually, before you do a click, notice at the top left where that little pen tool icon is. For you guys, it probably says Path. Set it to Shape, and you'll have a pen tool ready to make a shape layer. And whatever color you want it to be, you can play. See where it says Fill there? That'll be the color. Now this is a good way to see how the pen tool works. Like a lot of people kind of play around with the curves and they don't get a feel for how the curves go. Give this a try. Just pull things around. And if you want to change the path at any point, just like in the regular paths panel, if you hold down the Command key, you get that direct select tool. And notice how you can change this in real time. You can add points to it. You can move those points around. You can make it really quickly into modern art. Well, whatever, you mean the resolution? I think for it defaulted to 372 is fine. The nice thing about this pen tool is there is no resolution. It's all vector information. So if you did it at 72 pixels per inch and the client's like, this is supposed to be 300, you could convert it to 300, it'll still be just as sharp. Raster you couldn't say that about. And you can play with these attributes afterwards. You can make other layers. Although you'll notice, we see this in the layers panel. It's not a path. This is an actual shape. It's something that's sitting there. It is visible. A regular path, if I just started making a new path here, whoops, except I'm still set to shape layer. If I just make a regular old path, we see it in the paths panel. We don't see it in the layers panel. The shape layer there, it's colored with whatever the fill is. Like if I grab my pen tool, set it to shape there, we can see the attributes for this shape layer. If I want it to be a red shape, it's a red shape. Just tell it whatever color you want it to be. If you want it to have a bit of a stroke, say I want to give it a little bit of maybe a black border around there, I could choose black, set a width, and you can play around with just like a regular old layer. It's a normal blending mode right now. You could do different blending modes. You can have some fun with it.